Hello everybody and welcome to Natural Selection in Planetside 2, which is my little tutorial on how to become dynamic in Planetside 2. So to give you a little bit of an abstract outline, let's just think of Planetside 2 as a process of natural selection. Those that adapt, survive and get the kills. So this guide is going to be focusing on becoming dynamic in the game and becoming a big competitor to all the other players, and it's going to really look at the importance of movement in Planetside 2 and map awareness over sort of accuracy and sort of the smaller skills that might be in other FPS shooters, but not so much in Planetside 2, which is an open world warfare type game. So to set it off, you can never really know all the bases in Planetside 2, apart from the copy and paste ones like the biolabs, towers and tech plants. So you're always kind of on the back foot in knowing where to fight from and where to go and where the best place to hide is. So this guide will try and tread in the areas between the bases and how to react to being a bit bewildered, to be honest, by the environment. So it isn't like CSGO or Call of Duty or whatever, where you know the maps and it's very important to hide in certain spots and there are favourite spots, because a lot of the time you'll have no idea where you are. And I've played thousands of hours of Planetside 2 and there are so many bases I don't know off by heart and so many areas of the map that I'm so confused on. So who's this for? So it's for general players, just generally anywhere playing on the game. It can be very useful for lone wolves and squaddies in unfamiliar areas, and it's probably more applicable to infantry, but the same rules apply to tanks. But it's not really for service smash, uber tactical, super serious, where bases are mapped out scientifically and you know exactly where you're going. And what classes does it most benefit? So I think that massively light assaults need to be dynamic all the time, and so do infiltrators. But obviously all the classes can really benefit from this, although heavy assaults have a little bit of an advantage on face-to-face combat where you don't have the surprise because of their shields. Anyway, so first on the tip of being dynamic is being able to adapt on the fly to unfamiliar bases and unfamiliar terrain and turn them into a weapon, using the cover and being able to flank people and come round where they're not expecting you. So tip one area is about using the map and the mini-map especially. So you really want to map out firstly on the mini-map and also using your surroundings to see where the cover is and where you think you can map a little guide for yourself where you're going to go and how it's going to pan out. How are you going to be covered when you're running out there? And it's quite important, but it sounds a bit silly, but not getting stuck, like trying to travel up a big rock face or going through a little ravine and then finding out that you can't climb something, because it can happen. And sometimes when you spawn in a sundra, you think everyone there is trying to climb this ridiculous hill, and knowing that beforehand can save you some time. And it's also important to know where you can get the high ground and to flank and be able to come round the enemies. So if the minimap isn't clear enough for you, because sometimes it isn't, and sometimes you can't look out because you'll be shot out if you have a real scan of the area, you can look at your map and try and just zoom in and out and see where exactly you can go and where the enemies are. And I mean, it sounds stupid just standing there and using your map, but sometimes it's quite important to know where you're going. So all of you scouts and guides may find your orienteering lessons come into play here and are very useful. Also, the minimap can be used to know where your enemies and allies are, and this is really important to know where they're moving, and where they're moving towards, where the push is, which way are they facing. And obviously you sort of visualise that in your head as well as on the map as to where the areas are where they aren't facing and where they aren't looking. So basically you want to know where they are distracted, where the fights are sort of quite stale, and they won't be taking much consideration to people coming around them because they're so focused on that fight in front of them. It's very important to use that to your advantage and get to the sides where the focus is least, and to be able to pick people off, because enemies in groups falsely feel safe. This is one of the games where I find it hard to rely on my allies because there's so much going on. Like other shooters, like in Counter-Strike, for example, you have some sort of faith in your allies to keep your back covered, but because there's so many areas where enemies can come from, it's very hard to give them the benefit of the doubt, unless you're in a very well-organised squad. Another thing people may take for granted and as common sense is using trial and error. Think of all the entries into areas you don't know as a hypothesis in the beginning. A hypothesis that you want to turn into a useful method. So if your first effort to move into somewhere and use cover in an area that you're not too sure about fails, use your death to scout out the area when your orienteering and map skills aren't enough and when you've died because you haven't gone the right way. So that really you can come back prepared and more ready to kill. And sometimes it can take a few times to really get the right path and to know where exactly you need to go. And I find that when you find a route, you can follow it quite methodologically and probably get a lot of kills following that route that you've set out for yourself, until some high-ranking guy or somebody that catches on to you finds out exactly what your method is and they try and block you or come especially after you, which happens quite often. So you may have to become dynamic again and try a different route. So it's always just about adapting to your environment, adapting to what the players are doing, adapting to where you are in the map and where you're looking. And this isn't exactly about using the map and having map awareness, but loadouts are quite important, and I don't really want to go on about this, but being prepared for your situation, so in close quarters fights, bring close quarters weapons, fast firing weapons, it's quite common sense, and in mid-range fights and fights which for platoon cover, bring jack of all trades, like a lot of the default weapons and sort of nanite systems guns. Personally, I don't use shotguns at all, just as a dislike. I don't really like their playstyle, but it's up to yourself, and obviously long range is a bit of an iffy one, because as a sniper, when you snipe somebody, they can just respawn again, and it doesn't make as much of a difference when you kill people at long range, unless the fight is exactly there, and that's where the push is going on, because they can just respawn somewhere else, and your kills don't mean so much. But if what you want is to kill people, which I think everyone has their own playstyles, then go ahead, and obviously bringing longer range weapons and snipers can be very fun and get you the kills. Anyway, hopefully I've covered some interesting stuff that you may not have thought of or not thought too much about, and I hope people will be able to employ their own dynamic hypotheses and become part of the apex in the food chain of Planetside 2. Anyway, thank you all very much for watching. If you've got any other tips or you think I've missed something, be sure to put it in the comments, and if you want to just comment anything, put it there. Like, subscribe, the jazz, there's buttons all here, blah blah blah. Until next time everybody, Joshino. Sort of help, but if we go to the heat maps and go to enemy activity, I think the map's much easier to read, and we can see exactly how many enemies there are in each area. And also, I'll mention now that there's an enemy and ally activity tab that you can use, which makes the fights that are almost even grey.